The next speaker is Yves Cote. Yves has served nearly 32 years in prisons all over Canada. He has spent time in 18 different institutions at every security level, including the Special Handling Unit in Quebec, the country's highest level of security. As a child, Yves was subjected to unspeakable trauma and victimization at the hands of those who were entrusted to care for him. As a result, Yves learned to use violence as a tool to protect himself. During his incarceration, Yves found a new way forward to live a life without violence. Through committing himself to personal growth, spiritual service, and volunteerism, Yves transformed. In 2010, Yves became a certified facilitator for the Alternatives to Violence project. He also coordinated this project for several years and played a key role in inspiring and influencing other prisoners to explore a path of nonviolence. Yves has been living in the community on parole for almost 2 years. He works tirelessly at his job, continues to volunteer with AVP, speaking publicly to criminology students, and enjoys spending time with his friends and his loving partner.
Thank you for having me here this morning. What I would like to say is one of the hardest things for us to admit is we all have the choice to do what we do or not. And I, for myself, realized that I always had the choice. I had the choice to do what I did. And I knew the consequences, and I still went through with it. And one of the problems is that I believe strongly that the only person that was paying for my crimes is myself. And having low self-esteem, self-worth, I didn't care. I didn't care what happened to me, so as long as I was the only one paying, I didn't care. In 1995, I received a second life sentence for a murder that I committed in the institution, in a maximum. And I remember that a day or two after I got sentenced to the second life sentence, I was placed in the SHU. And that's mentioned before is the Special Handling Unit in Quebec, which is basically 23 hours and a half locked up a day, and that's just the way of life. And you know, a lot of people would tell us in prison, they say that the only life sentence that counts is your first one. The rest of them are free. Interesting thing on that statement is that most people who say that are not serving life sentence. When I received my second life sentence, I felt that the impact that it had on me is I just kept on digging the hole I was in deeper and deeper and deeper. And then again, I only felt that I was the one paying for my crimes. I remember one night, it was about 2 days before Christmas in '95. I got sentenced around that time too in December. I remember walking back and forth in my cell, and it was Montreal is very cold, so it was a very cold night. I was walking back and forth, and then something just hit me. I realized that the person who was next to me, the cell over, was my younger brother, who is 4 years younger than I am. And I also know that the only reason he was in there is because I brought him in there, because of my violence behavior and my bad influence on him. It is also the first time that I actually realized that my crime affected other people. And once I started realizing this, it had a snowball effect for me, because then I started to think about all the other violence that I used in my life. I remember one thought that I had was, when we do a bank robbery, if we don't shoot anybody, we feel that we didn't do no damage. We had no victims. But when I started to think about it, I could only imagine the fear that was going through those people's mind when I walked into a bank with a shotgun. I know for myself I would have been terrified, even if nobody would have shot me. So 10 years after this, I was transferred to a minimum. I didn't go from the shoot to a minimum. I went through a process. I had to go back to a maximum for a few years. Then I went to a medium for a few years. Then eventually I was transferred to a minimum security. From there, that's where I got involved in restorative justice, AVP. Some of us don't have the opportunity to hear victim impact statement just because of where we did our crime, and we're so far away from them. And some of them we plead guilty. However, participating in a program called AVP, is Alternative to Violence Project, I had the chance to meet victims of crimes. And for me, it was giving me the chance to put a face on the victims that I've done. And hearing them talk also showed me the impact of my crimes had on them. I know that a lot of times we talk about forgiveness. I would never be that arrogant to ask forgiveness for my crimes. I don't feel I have the right to do that. What I've done is horrible. I took 2 people's life. But what I understand also from what the previous speaker said and what I've heard in the past is, what are we doing in prison to change this? You know, you could say sorry till you're blue in the face, but if you don't change the behavior, it means absolutely nothing. So in '95, when I made that, that's when I decided to change. I said enough is enough. Well, I never went back down security. Once I started going forward, I never went back because I was sincere. And what I've done from that point to being released is I did change my behavior and I did change my values to make sure that what I've done would never happen again. I definitely cannot change the past, but I definitely have the choice of how the future is going to be. A couple of weeks ago, I was granted full parole, and this was granted 27 years after my first murder. And I have to say that I am actually an individual that the authorities never had to let out. They could have kept me in prison for the rest of my life without any reasons, because I'm doing 2 life sentences. And I also know at the same time that if I would ever commit another act of violence, the damage that would do to the people that believed in me, that gave me the chance along the way of my sentence, that believed that I was sincere in my changes. I would never want to deceive these people that helped me. The volunteers. I lost all my family since that 32 years period. I lost all my family. Some of them I haven't talked for over 32 years. But that's my own fault because I committed my crimes. Do I have any hatred or anger towards them? Absolutely not, because I could put myself in their place. And I don't know if I would want to be associated with a brother that had this kind of history in violence. I continue talking, as was mentioned in the bio, I continue talking to university students, and I also talk to high school students. I do this because I feel that it's my responsibility. It is my responsibility to warn people what happens when we take bad choices, when we make bad choices in our life. And to the younger generation, I think it's also my responsibility to tell them exactly what prison is like. Prison is not like in the movie, it is not like any TV episode that you could watch. But at the same time, we create our own hell. The only thing I could say is I know and I am convinced that I will never commit another act of violence in my life. Thank you. I know I could understand the fear that the young man, the first one you met, the fear that he had, because I could only imagine, with all my history, violence, I would be very scared because you hurt these people. I could understand the fear behind it. My brother and I cut ties in 1998, and he was out. He completed his sentence. He did not receive a life sentence for involvement in the murder. And he finished his parole and all that. And in 1998, he decided to cut ties with me. And I think he's still struggling with his issues, drug and alcohol issues. I will never have anything bad to say about my brother. I love him. And I wish him well. Hope he's doing fine. When I say it's not like in TV, on TV or in the movies, here's an interesting fact. One thing that we don't know when we're younger and we go into prison is how we're going to be treated. And what I mean by that is a lot of inmates in our prisons have been sexually abused when they were children. And I remember the thing that bothered me the most in all the years that I've done was the strip searches. Because each time that I was strip searched, I was right back at those of sexual abuse. And some people will say, well, I got used to them and I didn't care anymore. Well, I could never get used to it. So that was the most difficult part for me in prison, is that repeat going over again. And is it necessary? Of course it is. I mean, we live in a world where there's drugs and alcohol and in prison, so it is a reality of it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on the people getting the treatment. Absolutely. Absolutely, because I knew that he was in there because of me. Because I know he smoked his first joint with me. He drank his first beer with me. And he probably used violence the first time with me. So I wasn't always, unfortunately, I wasn't always the best influence for my brother. So I felt that responsibility. We ended up doing about 10 years together. I have something else I'd like to add. about what's difficult in prison is one of the reasons why I talk to young people is because I believe that I started with the justice system when I was 11 years old. And I believe that if somebody like myself, with the time and the experience that I got, would have came and talked to me and tell me exactly what is prison, okay, the things that, what is institutionalization and all that, where you lose control of completely everything of who you are, and also about the strip searches. I believe that if somebody would have came and saw me and talked to me when I was at that age, it would have had an impact on me for sure. It may have changed my life around. Just that statement would have been enough for me. The interesting thing is, within that 32-year period, I was out 11 months. And the 2 previous times that I got released, even the 3rd time, I decided to come back myself because I just couldn't function outside in the community. And coming back out now, one of the things that helped me the most to succeed was the support that I got from volunteers that came into prison, and also the authorities, CSC itself, because it is a completely new world when you do that much time and you come out. The technology, the inflation, everything, and also the freedom, because when you're used to, when you're institutionalized, and I was at a very young age, you know, you're told when you're going to get up, you're told when you're going to go to yard, you're told when you're going to go to work, you're told what kind of work you're going to do, when you're going to eat, etc., etc. Well, when you get all this freedom, to be honest, it's scary, and you get lost. And I have to admit that I was more scared of getting out of prison after all this time that I was walking into a maximum at 20. Because I had a feeling I knew what I was getting into, but I really didn't know. They didn't reach out to me. And I know some people in prison will try to contact the victims to have a mediation going. But personally, I think that's arrogant. And it would be arrogant. I think it would be it could be some damaging to the victim. And if they would have asked me, I would have met with them, but not without fear.
Thanks very much, Yves. I can only imagine the amount of courage it takes for you to come and speak publicly and share your story. So thank you very much for coming here today. I think for me, a piece that I took away from that is just the importance of all of the volunteer and support workers that assist our victims and beyond. And it doesn't go unnoticed, the work that you put in, and it's straight from the heart. So thank you for all of the work and assistance and dedication that you put in day to day. You can hear it just when Yves speaks that, you know, the whole part of why he wouldn't reoffend is he wouldn't want to disappoint those that have supported him, and that's very powerful. So thank you very much for coming here today.